Alright everyone, welcome back to our PowerPoint course. And so we're going to begin with just an introduction to PowerPoint. And so we're not going to get into any specific thing in this. We'll just go through the interface, the options. So this might be a bit of a longer video, but this is just going to make sure that everybody is familiar with the interface and all the different settings that you might want to know about. So this is a good one to watch before we go further into additional PowerPoint skills. So when you open PowerPoint, you're often going to be presented with this menu. So it'll have your recent items at the top, but any items that you've pinned, which you all know how to do by now from watching the earlier videos, you can actually pin those icons in your taskbar, and also you can pin them here, right? So anything that you'd like to keep pinned, there's a little icon there, and it will save it in your pinned list, all right? Also, if you guys are new, I would suggest you go through this Welcome to PowerPoint and bring your presentations to life with 3D. These are just various tutorial videos that you guys can go through as well, and we'll look through some of that as well. You can also just click on the blank presentation to start with something new, or you can use one of these templates up here, which is a great way to get started with a kind of professional design kit. So that'll kind of set fonts, colors, and layouts for you in a nice way. And if you're just trying to throw something together quickly and make it look good, this is probably the best way to do it, especially if you don't come from an arts background or a design background. Using these presets can really help your presentation look a little bit more professional, and it's fairly easy to modify them by just changing the pictures to what you want them to be. So, working in conservation, you might change out the background images to be landscapes or wildlife or anything. You don't need to leave them, as their stock images. You can also click here to browse more themes, and this will actually open up a whole large theme editor. And as you can see, there's tons of stuff that you can use, and there's also kind of searchable themes, so you can kind of look for stuff. So if I type like Earth and search that, it's going to pull up, for example, some lessons that we can see, and these are all templates that you can use as your starting layout. And again, for people that are maybe a bit less familiar with design, this is a great way to get your presentations looking professional, even without coming from a professional design background. And once again, you can very easily change out the colors. You can change the images to be whatever you'd like them to be. So this is something that I strongly recommend for everybody. So you got all sorts of different themes here that you can go through and take a look at, and that's that. You can also click blank presentation to start new, or you can click on open. Now, something to be aware of with PowerPoint is that because it's a Microsoft product, it really likes to encourage you to use OneDrive. So OneDrive is the kind of equivalent of Google Drive, but built by Microsoft and integrated into Windows. It's not something that I use. If you do use it, that's great. But just bear in mind that it will often try to get you to save to there or to load from there. So just keep that in mind, and we'll go through how to adjust those settings later. So once again, if you click on open, it'll have your recent presentations pinned, and then based on the last time you opened it. Or you can click on folders, and it will actually show you the folders that you've been working with recently. But annoyingly, none of this is a browser, as a Windows Explorer browse menu, so it's very difficult to find. Also note down here is if you forget to save a presentation, you might be able to recover it from down here. This is this recover unsaved presentations, and it'll look for any unsaved files that are temporarily saved. Let's go. Okay. I'm just going to open that again because I closed it by accident. All right. So if you want to open a file, this is where you would kind of browse for that file. And so you can click on this PC, and it'll load a kind of modern thing here, but it really just defaults to documents, and then you can kind of like navigate through it this way. And it's not very... For me, I prefer the pop-up browse menu. So you can do this. You can also search. There's a search function. You can kind of select a folder and search for it. But for me, I just click browse, because now it just pops up with a regular Windows File Explorer browse window, and I can find what I'm looking for. And this for me is the easiest way to find, the program that I'm looking to open, right? And so then I'd find it there and click open. Okay, so that's how you kind of manage PowerPoint from the very home screen. And what we're going to do before we move into an actual presentation is just go through a few of the things down on the bottom. First is account. And so note that if you click on account, it's going to load up your Microsoft Windows account. And this will be tied to your Office activation. And so in our case, we have activated a real license, which again is always the legal thing to do and is the correct thing to do if you want the full features. I will note that you can buy Office without getting the 365 subscription. I'm actually a big opponent. I really disagree with this whole policy of selling you software and then continuing to charge you for it every year. I think it's a bit of a scam done by some of the largest and wealthiest companies on the planet, and I really dislike it. Luckily, Microsoft does give you an option to buy Microsoft Office a single time. It's not as up to date, obviously, as Office 365, and it comes with a few less features and a few less programs. But it is at least a one-time purchase, and you can get them discounted for like, $90, $80, $70. So all the way down to like $30 if you've got, various credentials. So we get a bit of a discount on it because of our Google for Nonprofits. That's through Network for Good, which we'll have a video on later. But this is something that I strongly recommend, is just buy the single use license. It works on 2 machines, I believe, for a single user. And it's way better than paying, hundreds of dollars every year forever. So that's this. And this is all related to your account. And again, OneDrive is always going to be connected, and unfortunately, there's no way to disable it. We're going to skip feedback, simply because this is just Microsoft collecting feedback from us. And we'll go to options. And so we'll go through these options fairly quickly. There's a few really important things in here to be aware of. So we'll start with general, and we'll work our way down through these option list. If something is not important, I'm probably just going to skip it. If there's something that I see that I use a lot, I will mention it. So the first is collapse the ribbon automatically. So as you can see, at the top of this PowerPoint, we have this thing open. This part here is called the ribbon. And actually, you can automatically expand it or retract it by clicking this little arrow up here in the top right. This is like a little drop down arrow. And for me, I don't want to constantly have to click on that. I just want it to always be there because that's where all the tools are. So I actually have it set to always stay open. And so therefore I leave this unchecked. Now you can change this option from here, but you can also change it directly from your PowerPoint file, which we'll get to in a minute. All right. Show feature description and screen tips. That's fine. Username and initials. So this is actually something that I recommend that everybody set. And so whoever's account this is should add their username that is going to show up, and they should add the initials. And so as you can see, the username will show up here on the top of the presentation, and it will also label it with the initials if you're commenting or something. So this is really useful if you're working on projects together, because you can see which file is created by which user. You can, if there's a joint project, if there's multiple people working on the same file, you can have comments from different people with using their initials. So anyways, this is what I recommend setting it up. Put your username and put your initials in there. And LinkedIn features. I didn't even know that this had LinkedIn features. Show the start screen when this application starts. Yeah, that start screen can be useful sometimes. So I think that's it for general in terms of the important stuff. So let's go to proofing. And I don't think we need to go through anything here. The only thing I would suggest is to make sure that check spelling as you type is indeed checked. So this way you'll have your spell checker always showing you if there's a word that you've had a typo on directly in your presentation, and right from there you can just right click it and fix it. Mark grammar errors as you type. Yeah, so you can again check that. Yeah, I would leave this like this. We can move on to save. Now in save we have a lot of very useful things to discuss. So First of all, is this very important thing here that everybody should know about. Auto recovery information. If you have a power cut, if your computer crashes or whatever, you don't want to lose a lot of work. And so I have my PowerPoint set to save an auto recovery file every 10 minutes. And then it also says keep the last auto recovered version if I close without saving. So let's say I saved it 2 hours ago, but I forget to close it. When I close it, let's say I saved 2 hours ago, but then I forget to save it again before I close it. So I close the application, I go, oh no, I didn't save it. Well, actually, because I've got this checked, it's going to keep the last auto-recorded version if I closed without saving it. So even if I saved an hour ago, because I'm doing an auto-recovery every 10 minutes, it'll use that one from 10 minutes ago. And then very importantly, this is where you find those files. So everybody knows what a address is now. So you guys know how to navigate through this to find these files. But if you don't know where these files are, they don't do anybody any good. And so not only is this where you go to find it, but this options menu is also where you go in case you forgot where they were. So if you go, oh man, I forget where PowerPoint automatically saves its files, no problem. Open PowerPoint, come to the options, come to the save, and check here. It'll always tell you where the files are saved. And then you can go to your computer, to this PC, and you can navigate through and find those files. All right? All right, so don't save that now. We can leave that. Show additional places for saving, even if a sign-in may be required. This is, again, if you want to save it directly to OneDrive or Google Drive or other integrations. I'm actually going to turn this off because I don't use it. I always want it to save to my computer by default. So I'm going to check this, save to computer by default, because I really don't want my PowerPoints saving to the cloud and not being accessible on my computer, or only being accessible if I have an internet connection. I always want the PowerPoint file to exist physically on my current computer, whether I have internet or not. And so then this is the default local file location. So whenever you see the word local, it means on this current machine, right? And not through any synced online anything. So in this case, it's just going to default to the standard documents folder, which is fine. So if you accidentally forget to organize your file where it needs to be, you know it's probably going to be in, username and then documents. Offline engine. Okay, we don't really need to worry about that because we don't use server files. And then, okay, so this is fine. We don't need to worry about that. Okay, so that's really it for here. So this was the most important part. It's just the automatic saving and understanding where that all was. All right, let's go to language. So this is where you would add additional languages if you wanted to be able to spell check different languages, right? So if you wanted to add Khmer, you can do that. You need to download, make sure that the keyboards and the languages are installed first. But do note that even if you don't have languages installed here, you'll still be able to type in those languages if you have the keyboard installed and the language set in your Windows, as I showed you how to do that earlier on. It just won't give you the spelling correct. So this is the thing, and I'm not even sure how accurate it is in Khmer, but this is where you would come to do that. All right. Let's go to ease of access. Again, this is for accessibility for people with issues with vision or hearing, sight, sound. So I'm going to skip that because I'm lucky that I don't have any of those problems. And so we'll go to advanced. When selecting, automatically select the entire word. That's a useful feature. Allow text to be dragged and dropped. Fine with me. Do not automatically hyperlink screenshot. No, we don't want that. Use smart cut and paste. Yes. Show options when content is pasted. Yeah, that's always good. Sometimes you don't just want to paste. You want to paste, for example, only the format, but not the content. Or you want to paste the content, but not the format of the content. So a lot of times if you're copying and pasting something from the internet, if you've downloaded a list of, specs for a species or something, if you just paste it without anything, it'll pull the formatting from online and it'll make your PowerPoint presentation look messy. So having this options allows you to paste with various options. So, yeah, so if you have a pen, you can enable that. That's not important. This is fine. Vertical ruler, you should definitely leave that on. That's going to be helpful. Automatically extend display when presenting on a laptop. I would leave this checked. And so again, what this does is, as you guys remember from our display tutorial in course number 1, we discussed the different modes for having multiple laptops set up. One of the modes we discussed was extended mode. And in extended mode, you're setting your 2 screens as separate, distinct displays. So you can have different information on the 2 different displays. What this is saying is that it's going to automatically change your display output mode to extended mode when it detects that you're doing a presentation on a laptop or a tablet. So that's a useful feature, but you should be aware of what that means. That means if you want it to be exactly the same image on both screens, you don't want to have this checked. Now, luckily, you can always change this in the slideshow settings once you're doing your slideshow. So for me, I would suggest leaving that checked. And then if you have a situation in which you need it, you can just unchange it directly in the slideshows menu. You don't have to open this again. Okay, all of the slideshow options like this, I would keep checked. This is useful. And then print, that's all fine. I, to be honest, don't recommend printing anything anymore because it's 2020 and there's almost never a reason to waste paper anymore like that. If you're doing a presentation, do a presentation. You don't need to print it out for everybody. If everybody wants it, send them a PDF of it later. We'll go through how to do that as well. All right, customize ribbon. We're not going to go through this right now, but this is important to know what it is and what it does. And so basically, there are some functions of PowerPoint that are kind of hidden. And I can't off the top of my head think of which ones I have added. But essentially, as you can see over here on the left, here are a bunch of different commands, right? So all sorts of things that you would find inside these different ribbon options. And essentially what you're doing here is adding different shortcuts and different little buttons to these ribbons if they're something that you find that you're using a lot. So you just select it and just click add and it will pop it over to whatever one of these you've checked. So this is the home ribbon, right? So this is home is over here. Here's the, let's see, so insert tab. So that's this tab over here, insert. So you can add them to different tabs. You can make new tabs. There's all sorts of things you can do by doing this. You can even create your own groups and do a lot of customization. So we're not going to go through it in these courses, but it is important to know this is here in case you were like, boy, I use this button a lot and it's really hidden. You can actually come in here and adjust that. These are the popular commands, but you can also just see all the commands. And as you can see, there's tons of different commands that you can insert. And yeah, it's just so that you can kind of customize the buttons that you use the most. And so it would just literally add it. So if I added buttons to the home, they would be added kind of in this empty space up here. All right. So that's this quick access toolbar. It's the same idea. And then we're going to go to, we're going to skip add-ins. I might show you how to do some of those later. Yeah, a few important ones. I'll show you how to do that later, but not from here. And then Trust Center you can skip. So that's it. We finished the options menu. So we're going to close out of that. And let me again go back to that home screen. Right, so we've gone through the home screen, we've gone through the options for PowerPoint, and now we're going to go to a blank presentation, and we'll just go through the different tabs and where things are. You'll note that if you're using a real PowerPoint, you get these design ideas that pop up on the right. I found these super useful, not even without using them. I just to look at them and see layouts and options. It's pretty cool. And again, if you just click on any one of these, you can see more design ideas. It'll just turn your page into that. And then you can customize as you want. It's just a nice way, again, of using kind of more professional looking templates. And then you can just change the images to be what you want. It saves a bit of time and work. If you don't like that, you can tell it to stop showing you design ideas, but it doesn't bother me. So if I'm not going to use it, I just come up here and close it, but I don't want it to permanently stop showing me ideas. So I'm just going to close that for now. And here we go. So we have essentially 4 parts. We've got this tiny little bar on the bottom, right? And this will tell us our current slide number. It will allow us to click on this little book to see the comments. It will give us this little quick option for slideshow. These are basically different viewing modes. So this is kind of like normal editing mode. This is the slides shorter, so it'll show you all the slides at once, and you can move them around to reorganize them. Reader view will turn it into like a little booklet, and slideshow is slideshow. Here we've got our scale slider, and we've got our fit slide to current window. So this is a kind of a useful button in case you're like zoomed out or you're zoomed in. You just click on that and it'll just squeeze that slide in to fit perfectly inside your current view. And this can be quite useful if you've got 2 PowerPoints side by side and you want this PowerPoint to be as big as possible. You can just click on that and it'll scale exactly to fit your current window. So that's a nice little button, nice little trick here. So then we've got over here on the left-hand side the slides, and this can be made smaller or bigger just by dragging the border here. And of course, if you have multiple slides, you can jump through those slides by just selecting them. This is something that a lot of people ask me is, their slides are too small, they can't see them, they look too similar. Well, so just make it bigger, and you can easily scroll through. So your mouse wheel will scroll through it. You can also reorder them by dragging them around like this. And by right-clicking, you can make a new slide or you can make a section. So we'll call this section 2. Yep, got it. See these little pop-up tips? I don't really use these, but sometimes I learn something new, so I actually leave it up, even though I've been using PowerPoint for years. So sometimes it's nice to have these things up. So if I have this section 2, what I can now do, I can also rename the section. So right-click on the section and rename. So it gives you a few options. You can remove the section and all slides in it. You can remove all the sections and just have just your slides. So like maybe while you're editing, it's like, you make a section called, slides in progress, slides needing review, and then completed slides. So you make 3 sections that are purely used during the design and the development phase of your PowerPoint. And when you're done with it, you want to remove all the sections. So you can just click on that and all your sections disappear, but none of the slides disappear, right? So that's one, use case in which you might use sections. Another one might be chapters, contents menu. For me, if we're doing a species fact sheet, I'll make a section for each animal, and that way we can just duplicate the whole section. You can delete the section and all of the slides in with that section by clicking this. And then you can also collapse it or expand it. And so this is very useful if you have large presentations with lots of slides and transitions. This way you can kind of open or close the section that you're working on. So this is a very useful feature, especially for larger, more complicated presentations, and especially if you're designing interactive presentations where the order of the slides matters less than the groupings. And so in a presentation like that, the audience or yourself or whoever is going to be jumping around between different slides by using hyperlinks. And so just to keep the craziness in check, sections will help you kind of keep everything organized and grouped together in a sensible way. All right, then we've got the main panel in the center. So that's just where you do all your work. And we've got the bar across the top. And so just note something is that if I've selected over here and I press Control-C, it's copying this whole slide, right? If I've selected over here and I press Control-C, I've copied this whole slide. You can't actually do anything on your current slide until you click into this area. And so, for example, you'll see I've clicked on nothing right now, so that is still selected. If I was to select this box on the edge, now if I copy, it's not copying this slide, it's copying just that item. So you notice if I come here now and I click, let's make a new slide, and we'll make it empty. If I click paste now, I get just that top bar. But if I'm over here and I forget to click into my workspace, and I just select copy over here, and I come here and I try to paste, it actually pastes a whole new slide, rather than just pasting the part that I was after. You got to make sure you're clicking into the slide workspace before you're doing any actions. Otherwise, you're just going to be, dealing with your slides over here. Okay. So let's go through each of these top tabs and discuss what they are, and then we'll get into actually doing stuff in later videos. So First, we'll go through the Home tab. So here we have our paste options with all of the different options that you can select. And so the first is use destination theme. So wherever you're pasting, it'll look at the place where you are pasting and it will match the theme to that place. Keep source formatting means it's going to keep the format from where you are copying, and then pasting a picture is paste a picture, and it gives you other options. There's more options to paste special there. New slide is new slide. You can just select it and it will add a new slide, and you'll notice this one came in number 2. Why? Because I had currently selected number 1. If I select down here and I click new slide, it pops in at the bottom. Also from new slide, you can choose an official layout. And so these themes that you see here are the standard ones that come from Office. I almost never use these because it's too limiting and it's too old-fashioned. There's customizing and making the themes yourself and making your layouts look unique and special is the power of PowerPoint. And so using these layouts are kind of, I mean, it doesn't look good because it looks like it just looks bad. So you're welcome to do it if it's not important that it looks good, but it's always important to make things look good, especially if it's outward facing. And even if it's inward facing, if you're designing something for your own team, nobody wants to look at something that doesn't look good. Everybody likes to look at nice things. So I don't particularly use these ever. I kind of make my own templates, and I'll teach you how to do that in a later video. All right. So then we've got, of course, because we've got something selected now, we also have the cut, copy, and the format painter. And again, format painter will just like get just the format rather than the actual content. And so you can take a format that if you formatted something nice, you got the right fonts, the right colors, the right effects, you can just paste that format to other things. Reuse slide format. So reuse slide is, so you can actually find a slide from another presentation. Again, not something that I bother with. It's much easier just to open that presentation, copy a slide from it, and paste it over here, and then adjust it. So now we'll go to layout. So again, the layout is here, and what this is basically showing you is that you can also change the layout once you've already got the slide in. So here we've got a slide. It's got this kind of title and thing. I can come up here, and I can change that to a different layout, right? Of course, it's a computer. There's always many ways to do the same thing. So I can also right-click here and go to Layout and change it from here. So, so it's here. We got another pop-up. It's saying you can organize. Oh, we're going to get into summary zooms later. Not something I use, but an interesting feature. Right. Reset slide will totally reset your slide from this right-click menu. So you can also have cut, copy. You can have your paste options. New slide, duplicate slide, very useful if you have a nice layout and you want to keep consistent to that layout. You can duplicate a slide that you've already got and just change the pictures and text and move it around. I do this all the time. So especially for like chapter headings or if I design a species fact sheet, but now I've got 10 species that are going to have the same exact layout, just right-click duplicate. You don't have to create the slide again from scratch. And actually, this helps you make sure that your slides are consistent. If you don't do this, and you're just trying to recreate the slide again and again and again, inevitably things will be moving around and sliding around and it won't look good. So duplicating slides is a very, very powerful feature, and is especially important if you're doing something that is like an interactive kiosk type of presentation, because you want to make sure that your menu buttons and your hyperlinks are always exactly in the same place, because it'll look real weird if they're sliding around. Format background will allow you to format the background for this slide, and you can also choose to apply it to all. So if I decide that I want all my backgrounds to be this off gray, I can click apply to all, and now all of my slides have this kind of darker gray background. All right. Anything that pops open here on the right, you can always just close temporarily, and it'll come back the next time you recall that menu. All right, so section we already went through. What's that? And so then we have our font. I'm not going to go through this. You guys already know what this is. There's a few things that I will show you that can be quite useful. The first is anytime you are working on a light background or an image, there's a few little helpful tricks to have your text stand out. So we'll just go ahead and put a image into this picture so that I can... you know what we'll do? We'll just make this a light background. How about that? We'll go back to white. Sorry, not to white. To white. So now what I'm going to do is, this is a title. So let's go ahead and make this font white. As you can see, this is now invisible. However, this little button right here adds a drop shadow. And what that does is that makes that text pop, even if it's on a difficult to read background. And so this is very useful. This is a very useful trick if you're putting text on top of images. This will really help that text pop out. So having that shadow option there is a really nice function and very useful. Another thing that you might find useful is this one, which is to basically space your font out, which can make it kind of more cinematic. You have to select the font that you want, but basically you can just make it look, this is, something like that. You just get this more dramatic spacing of your text. All right, so these two things I use fairly frequently, the drop shadow and the character spacing. Of course, you can always bold it. You can change your fonts here, your size up and down. It's all very useful. I don't use the highlighted color. Really, you should only use this for editing and review. And then here's where you set your font color. And not only can you choose from these default ones, you can eyedropper from a picture or an image to get exactly that color, or you can select more colors. And here, not only do you have these standard colors, but you can also go to custom colors, find it exactly on the color on the rainbow here, or even type it in. And the interesting thing about typing it in is that this allows you to keep with your brand. And so you can do RGB, red, green, blue, or you can use a hex color, which is the more useful option because it's just one thing to paste. So you can have all of your colors saved on menu and just go ahead and paste those hex colors there. And once you do that, they will actually save. So for example, if I was to create a new color right now, let's say I create this weird blue, and I click OK, this font color will now be available again without me having to go and make that color a second time. So once I click this, here's my recent colors, and there it is. And realistically, in a document, you shouldn't have more than four colors for your fonts. Like having that many more font colors is a little bit overkill. Realistically, a presentation with a unified design should have at the most like 2 font colors, maybe a few dark ones and maybe one light one, or vice versa, and then a few kind of highlight and theme colors, and they all work together nicely. Pretty much every presentation that I've ever made has either almost black font or white font. So I don't use black font because it's a bit harsh. The slightly lighter than black, so like a dark gray font, just looks really nice and it's soft on the eyes. It looks more attractive. And so I use that when it's on a light background, and when it's a dark background, I use white. Usually I give both of them small drop shadows, or I put them in a colored box. So that's another way to do it. But when it comes to colors, just bear in mind that any color you create will stay up here in your recent colors, and now you guys know how to set colors as well. So here's your bullets, here's your numbers. Bullets can be adjusted in terms of their style. Same with numbers. Numbers, I will agree. Bullets, I want to encourage everybody. There are very few cases in which you should ever have a bulleted list in a PowerPoint. This is 1990s style PowerPoint if you're still using bullets. Numbers sometimes are unavoidable, but having a bulleted list in a PowerPoint means you're not convincing anybody of anything. If you're trying to change somebody's opinion or inform somebody with information, find another way to do it than just giving them a boring list to read. Nobody is going to sit there and read a boring list, and therefore you're not going to convey your message. Find another way. Turn each bullet into a slide with a main point, just a main point on its head and some nice imagery or some nice graphics, some nice charts, or some good numbers to explain that message. Just listing them in a bullet is going to put everybody to sleep, and nobody will care. Nobody likes bulleted lists, so avoid them at all costs. Sometimes you have no choice, but try your best to go away from the idea of making bulleted lists. All right. This is useful. This is just an indent, so you can indent your list. If you do have a list below the first line, you can, so for example, If we have a situation like this and I want this to be a bit in, I just, anywhere within this line, I just select that and it'll bump it in one indent. If I press enter, it'll then keep creating on that same line. And to go back to the main, you'll see I get this little like thing popping up telling me, yep, it's going to create a new bulleted list. You just press backspace again and get rid of your indent, and then you can go back to your top level. And if you add a new bullet, you can indent that and you'll go back there like so. You'll notice it's auto scaling because I am in a text box, which we're going to go through in a little bit. All right. Here we've got align left, align center, align right, and justify. So justify is very useful if you're designing a report or a text-heavy design that has paragraphs. Essentially what it'll do is it'll just put spaces between words until the left and the right margins are lined up. And so this is something that I strongly recommend doing, but only for text-heavy documents that you're creating, such as annual reports, quarterly reports, progress reports, anything that is going to have that is not designed as much as a presentation as it is a report or a document, right? Or an article, something like that. So if you're writing a journal article, if you're preparing a report for your donors or your partners, and there's serious amounts of text going into your presentation, Justify just helps make it look cleaner and tidier. Here's where you'd add your columns. So you can do 1, 2, 3, or click more to add as many as you want, including adjusting the spacing between each column. And if you're in a text box or anywhere where you have text, it's that easy to do. So you just select the part that you want to have turned into columns, and that whole text box becomes 2 columns, and it will automatically scale and divide up based on how much text you have. All right. So we'll go back to 1 column there. This is another very useful one. This is the vertical spacing. So the spacing between each line of text, and so you can spread things out. And just note, if you want to adjust everything, you'll need to have it all selected, right? You see how that's changing everything, but originally if I just select the top one, it's only going to affect that top line. So this is something that is important to know, where it is. Text direction is if you want your text to show up left or right. This is very useful if you're doing a custom chart and you want to label something. It's just a very easy way to do it. Of course, you can always just hold shift and rotate the text box. That's how I would do it. It's just easier than having to click something. And the reason I hold shift is because that locks it onto, it snaps to different angles. So it just makes it easier to find the angle that I'm looking for. Right, so 90 degrees is an easy angle. If I don't hold shift, it just rotates smoothly, and like I'm trying to find straight. You'll notice it does snap to straight, but like it might be harder to find what you're looking for. I think without holding shift, like for example 45 degrees would be very difficult to find exactly. But while holding shift, it's very easy for me to get it back to straight or get it to 45 degree angle like so. So that's that. What else can we do with text? Okay, this one is very important. This is align text. This is something that a lot of people are not familiar with. This is, where is your text going to appear in the text box? Is it going to be at the top? Is it going to be in the middle? Or is it going to be in the bottom? There are some situations in which you might want it at the top, and there's some where you might want it at the bottom. But in most cases, I find that I'm aligning it to the middle. And so this is where that's done. We're not going to get into smart art in this tutorial. Okay, arrange. Here we've got our shapes, so we'll go through that when we get to insert, because your home menu basically has a bunch of things that are available on other menus as well. So this is going to have a lot of different things on it that we will not need to go through later. Arrange is probably one of the most useful and important buttons in PowerPoint, because it's not only about arranging things, it's also about aligning things and rotating things. And so, first of all, you have to think of PowerPoint as like every single thing that you've added to your page is like a piece of paper, right? So here's a piece of paper. It's sitting on a plain table. Here's another piece of paper. One piece of paper can be put down on top of the other one, right? So in this case, let's just change the color of this text to make it easier to see which one is where. Right, so as you can see, this black text is actually on top of the blue text. If I wanted to change that, I could select the blue text, arrange it, and bring it to the front. So now the blue text is on top of the black text. And so you have to imagine just stacks of paper with things on them. And you're just moving around that order of those stacks. And every single object that appears on your PowerPoint is exactly the same, right? So if you, like anything that you have here, you just have to picture it as a piece of paper, and it's just stacking. So you can take it and, sorry, I'll just stay on the home page for now, and send it backwards or send it forwards. So if I send it backwards, it'll go one level back. So it's now behind this blue one because I put the blue one in before it. If I send it back again, it's going to be under the blue one. And if I send it back again, it's going to be all the way in the back. Or you can just do one thing and it brings it all the way to the front or all the way to the back. So you can do that from up here in arrange. So basically you can step it up or down through your stack of objects on your workspace, or you can bring it all the way to the front or all the way to the back. You can do that from here, or you can also right click it and those options will come up here as well. Bring to front or send to back. And if you want those little steps, they're there as well. So bring forward will bring it one step forward, send it back will go all the way to the back, but this little arrow, send backward, will set it back one step. Very, very useful when you're customizing your layouts and various things. And a common trick that I'll do to make sure things are lining up with each other is to, I might have a copy. Let's say this is an image or something. I want it to be in exactly the same place. Well, I'll take let's make this an orange image. So I'll take my orange image, which is my new one. I'll get it just lined up perfectly on my old one. And then it's like, well, that's great. That's exactly where I want it. But now I have an unnecessary blue one behind the orange one. So I'll just right click this, send it to back, and delete the blue one. And now my orange one is in exactly the right place. This is a very, very useful trick to get things consistently in the same place across different pages. So if you have a good text in a good location, for example, I want this text right there, just copy it, paste it on the next page, or move another block of text on top of it and make sure they're lined up exactly. You get your new text ready. You send your new text to the back, right click, send to back, and your old text you can delete. All right, so that's moving to the front and back. There's a few other things in arrange that you can do. Group, this is useful. So if you have multiple things together, you can go up here and group them. Oh, it doesn't let me do it with that. Might not work for text boxes. So let's just take two shapes. There we go. So we'll arrange these. We can group them together, and now they will act as one object, right? So I can move these together, forward, back as one single object. You can, once things are in a group, you can still select again to be able to select individual items within a group, but you'll see that it's still, when I let go of the movement, it's still showing me a box around both of them. All right, so that's group. I'm going to go ahead and ungroup those. What else can we do here is align. So now, if you don't select anything, it will align your object to the actual slide itself. So if I wanted this text block to appear exactly in the center, I would select Align Center, and you'll see there's a picture here. This is going to be the horizontal center. Right, so the horizontal center of this slide, it shows it. It shows a vertical line going through the slide and the objects aligning to that line. So there we go. We are now in the horizontal center of this slide, but we're too high. We're not in the vertical center of the slide. So I'd come again, arrange, align, middle. And as you can see, here is a horizontal line, and we would center on that. So that would align us to the vertical middle of this slide. There we go. That object is now exactly in the center of this slide. This is a very useful trick. You can also align it to the bottom, the top, the left, the right, so on. But again, I find that those to be not really useful, because if you want to align it to the bottom, you can just bring it to the bottom and it will snap. You'll see these little red dots. If you want to align it at the top, you can just bring it to the top. It'll snap. So it snaps automatically to all of those edges. It also does snap automatically to the center, but it's harder to find. And that's why, there we go. So there I've just found the center of the slide. So I get that like cross right in the middle. But I find it much more useful to align to the middle, align to the center, rather than a line top or bottom, simply because, you know, the edges are easy to find, the middle is less easy to find. All right. Another very useful thing you can do, and this is going to come into play later, is arranging and distributing objects that are more than one object. So for example, let's say we have 3 objects, and maybe they're buttons, maybe they're pictures, whatever. So I want them to appear nicely distributed from the top to the bottom. But as you can see, you know, I can do this, and it will automatically give me a thing saying, hey, you've got them at just the right height, right? Now you can let go. Now I've got exactly the same space in the middle as I have on the bottom. But that's all great, but what about this part and this part? Well, there's a few ways you can do it. One way would be to select the whole group and look for it to snap to that middle line. It doesn't even show you because it's not grouped together. If you do group it together, now you should get a red line snapping to the middle. That's one way to do it. There is another way to do it, though, that's even easier, so I'm going to show you that. So what we're going to do first is we're going to mix these up a bit. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select these 3. So I'm going to hold Shift to select more than one image, or you can draw a box around all of them, and if you draw a box, you have to go around the object fully. If you go halfway through an object, like with the second box, it won't select it, and it does that so that you can select what you want and avoid what you don't want. So now that I've got all 3 selected, I'm going to arrange. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to align center. Now notice they didn't align to the center of the slide, they aligned to the center of each other. That's because I have more than one object selected. Now, I'm going to arrange, and I'm going to go to align here, and in this case, I'm going to distribute vertically. And so now it's automatically put the spacing of all of these in the right spot. Now I'm going to group this whole group together, and I'm going to go to arrange, align, and I'm going to align it to the middle, and now I'm going to hold Shift and move it over to the side. And again, the reason I hold Shift is because holding Shift is going to lock it onto this left and right axis. And there we go. Now, what if I wanted these to be edge to edge, no space between them? Well, there's another useful trick. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to just put them where I want them. So I'm going to group them up like so. Then I'm going to hold Shift, and I'm going to group them all together. And you have to group them all together to do this trick. Once they're grouped together, I'm going to put it into a corner, and I'm going to make it the full size and set it to whatever width I want. And now I'm going to ungroup this thing, and I have 3 perfectly distributed equal shapes filling up the space. This is very useful if you want to have an arrangement of pictures on the left side or boxes or anything, and you want it to be perfectly distributed across the entire width of the slide. If you don't group them, look at what happens. They scale separately, and it's not going to work out properly. Let's do this another way. If you wanted to have a bunch of vertical pictures, right? Let's say you wanted 5 columns, okay? So you wanted 5 pictures vertically distributed across your slide. So let's go ahead and make 2 more. All right, so once again, it's super easy. So I'm going to just put them together like so. I don't know what the size is, it doesn't matter. Then I'm going to select them all, group them together, put them up here, stretch it out like so, stretch it down like that, and then ungroup. These are now 5 perfectly identical shapes filling up the entire space. If these are pictures, to avoid the problem with stretching, it's no problem. You can just reset the picture to fill the frame so you get rid of any stretching or warping. We'll go through that in a later tutorial. Alright, so that's arrange, align, and then the last thing is find. This will just search your document for anything. Replace is going to replace certain text with other text, so if you realize that you've been spelling somebody's name wrong for your entire presentation, you can find and replace all of those instances throughout your whole document. It's very useful. The selection pane is quite useful. The selection pane will show you all of the objects on your current slide. So if I was to undo this, you can see it shows me I have this many rectangles. You can move them around, and by moving them around like so, I'm changing the order. So anytime I do this, basically what I would be doing is saying yes, if I want the gray rectangle to be on top of the orange one, I can right click and bring it to the front, but I can also do that by using the selection pane. It's the same idea. You can also turn them off and on. If you have something big that's in front that is blocking your vision, you can just hide them temporarily while you're editing by using the selection pane. So that's a very useful little trick. Another very important thing about the selection pane is that you can see the name and number of objects and items. So text boxes, blocks, charts, images will all have a name and a number, and this can be very important when dealing with transitions, and especially the morph transition, which we'll go through in a later time. All right, and I think we are finished with the Home tab.